Hey, how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. Welcome. It is March 5th, the year of our Lord 2023. So, I got a quick Bakhmut update here. But before I jump into this article from USA Today, and before we take a look at the map, I want to go ahead and take a look at what Zelensky said last year in December when he traveled to the United States Congress to speak to the congressmen of the U.S. And pretty much all the politicians there, asking for more support. He also talked about Bakhmut and its importance and significance for Ukraine. And I want to show you this once again and refresh your memory and my memory, because the West and Ukraine are trying and are going to downplay the victory of the Russian army in Bakhmut. They're going to try to say that it's not really important. As a matter of fact, most of the articles that I've been reading are trying to make it seem like it's the Russians who are making a big deal out of this. But in reality, it really doesn't have a big impact in the war, which is entirely contradicted by the words that came out of Zelensky's mouth when he was giving this speech at Congress last year in December. He actually went to the front lines of Bakhmut before he made this trip to the U.S., and he grabbed a Ukrainian flag that was signed by soldiers there in the front lines, and he gave it to Nancy Pelosi there and these people. And then he went on to make a big deal out of Bakhmut. So let's just hear this little piece from this video so that we can hear it from Zelensky himself.
To ensure Bakhmut is not just a stronghold that holds back the Russian army, but for the Russian army to completely pull out, more cannons and shells are needed. If so, just like the Battle of Saratoga, the fight for Bakhmut will change the trajectory of our war for independence and for freedom.
Whoa, he just said that the fight for Bakhmut would change the trajectory of the war, except, the reality is that it's going to benefit the Russians. It's going to change the trajectory in a much more positive way for the Russians, and very negatively for the Ukrainian armies. So he was right about that, but he was wrong in his estimate that the Ukrainians would be victorious. So now it's pretty evident, it's pretty obvious now to everybody that Bakhmut is over. The Russians have encircled it, as we're going to see here on the map right here, guys. This is Bakhmut. Let me go ahead and zoom out so you can take a look at the whole front line here of the battlefield. So there's Ukraine, of course. This is where all the action is taking place, as I've been covering, in the east of Ukraine. And we see Bakhmut here, what Mr. Zelensky was talking about 2 months ago, thinking that Ukraine would be victorious. Of course, Zelensky called it a fortress. Some of his commanders called it an impregnable fortress. So they were pretty much acting like this was unconquerable, much like Napoleon thought that he was invincible, much like Hitler's army thought he was invincible until they faced the Russian army. Now, that's just historical facts, guys. If that causes anger, then I'm sorry. That's just what happened in history. And this is what is happening right now. And again, I always show you Western media news sources so that you can't accuse me of showing you Russian propaganda. Most of the articles I use are CNN, New York Times, all these news sources that are pro-Ukrainian or at the very least unbiased towards Ukraine and Russia. I don't show you RT. I don't show you all these Russian news sources because I don't want to be accused of propagating Russian propaganda. As we're going to read, this is from the USA Today. This is a pro-Ukrainian Western news source. And That way, you don't have to believe me. You can believe these news sources that all the Westerners rely on. But it's pretty obvious that Bakhmut is done here. Civilians are being forced to move out of Bakhmut. Now, as these Western articles like to point out, this battle here for Bakhmut has been going on for months because the Ukrainians have been investing a lot of manpower into the city, again, because Zelensky and the West made a big deal out of Bakhmut prior to its collapse under the Russian attack. And so you might be wondering, why is there civilians still inside of Bakhmut if there's been so much fierce fighting going on for months, right? The reports state that there was a population of 70,000 people there. Most of the people left, but there are still a couple of thousand people inside of Bakhmut. And the reason these people haven't left is because they are actually waiting for the Russian forces to arrive and liberate them, much like has happened in other towns. So there was a Ukrainian soldier that there's a video going around the web that he's complaining that a lot of these Bakhmut residents are waiting for the Russians to be rescued. And so we can probably infer that a lot of these Ukrainian soldiers here probably have some sort of animosity or hatred towards these citizens who are waiting for the enemy, right? For the Russian forces. And so what is actually happening here is that they're being forced to leave. They're being forced to leave by the Ukrainian authorities, even though these people want to stay and wait for the Russians. And all these Western articles are making it seem like, these people are desperately trying to flee for their lives. But again, they've had months to leave, but these people that stayed behind actually want to be saved by the Russian forces, much like it has happened in other towns. And there's videos out there of the Russian forces arriving and, these people thanking them and pretty much receiving them or their arrival gladly. And really, they are putting their lives at risk in a area that is, being attacked and bombarded by the minute. So you can just see just how much they want to, be liberated, or how much they would rather be under the rulership of the Russian forces. And so what has happened, and as I reported in one of my previous videos, these Ukrainian forces in Bakhmut have actually forced these people out of their homes and have burnt their homes. They try to justify it or make up some excuse that they have to do this to cause a smokescreen, but in reality, this is just more discrimination and hatred towards these people who are pro-Russian, essentially, right? Who have a Russian historical background, who have Russian ties, who have Russian families. Their culture is Russian. And so now we're getting reports that these people, these citizens there, are having to flee on foot because it's apparently too dangerous. But I wouldn't doubt that the Ukrainians are just being evil towards these people and making them flee on foot and risking their lives, right? Risking an artillery landing on them as they're mixed in with Ukrainian units. And so there's a lot of lies that are taking place concerning these Bakhmut citizens that are staying behind, guys. Again, they do want to be delivered by the Russians. And unfortunately, they are being kicked out. They're not, the Ukrainian forces are not allowing these citizens to stay there. They're actually forcing them to leave. And again, the incredible fact here is that, as you can see here, Bakhmut is pretty much surrounded, and there are still Ukrainian forces here, but a partial pullout has began. There is a commander that made a video. Apparently, he received orders to pull out of Bakhmut. He is being sent over to another area. There's also reports that the Ukrainian army is sending some reinforcements towards Bakhmut, but obviously they're not sending it to try and take back Bakhmut. They're actually sending more forces to cover the forces that are going to be leaving the city and that are leaving the city. And as a matter of fact, there are reports that the Ukrainians have blown up some bridges, which is another sign that they are retreating now. And again, most of these Western articles, as we're about to read here, are underreporting the situation. And, we have to take everything with a grain of salt. Pretty much everything that they are saying is going to happen, probably already did. And the situation is a lot worse than they are reporting. And this is evident by the fact that they did this with Soledar, which I covered extensively here on the channel. And I actually reported, as you can see here, so down here is Bakhmut right here. And then if we move up to the northeast over here, we'll see Soledar. This was another sort of contentious battle here in Soledar. And I reported that the Russians had taken control of Soledar literally like a week before all these other Western news sources finally admitted. And then Ukraine, the Ukrainian army and government kept denying that the Russians had control. And once it was pretty much obvious, they never even actually mentioned it again. But now you can see, obviously, the Russian forces have pushed much further than Soledar. They've actually pushed beyond Bakhmut here. But now Bakhmut is about to be swallowed up. And so they are going to keep on moving forward. The next town here will be Chasiz Yar. This was supposed to be the fallback point for the Ukrainian forces, but that is now too dangerous. So we are going to see a major collapse here from the Ukrainian forces. And I assume we're going to see an accelerated push now as the confidence of the Russian soldiers, the Wagner forces, is boosted after this victory. They will probably push more aggressively towards Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. Also, they anticipate this support that is going to be arriving in Ukraine. Some of these German Leopard tanks are apparently already, moving in towards the battlefield, but they are supposed to receive more artillery, American tanks, within the next couple of months. So after this Bakhmut victory here, I'm assuming the Russians are going to push more aggressively, and most of these towns, guys, are going to start falling like dominoes because, again, the reason they're calling Bakhmut as a meat grinder is because the meat that is being grinded are Ukrainian forces. Literally, Zelensky has been stubborn after he made those comments there before Congress, and he has been sending a lot of his elite forces into Bakhmut. Again, they said it wasn't going to collapse. We just heard it from Zelensky that this battle was going to change the course of the war in a positive way, is what he was assuming for Ukraine, right? So he was assuming that Ukraine was going to have a major victory here in Bakhmut, and it would change the course of the war. Well, it's quite the opposite. It's changing the course of the war in favor of the Russians because it is now a victory for the Russian army and a loss for Ukraine. But anyways, let's go ahead now and jump into this article by US Today. So it says Ukraine military aids what? Okay, that's kind of worded a little bit weird. Ukraine military aids civilian flight from Bakhmut. Is Russia running out of ammo? Oh boy, here we go, guys. Remember a couple of months ago, they kept saying that Russia was running out of artillery. We now see that that was a lie. Bakhmut has literally been bombed to rubble. As a matter of fact, the ones that are running out of artillery is actually the Ukrainian forces, as one of these NATO politicians said that ammo is a big issue right now for Ukraine. So, anyways, let's keep on reading here. Ukrainian forces were helping civilians flee This is what I just talked about, guys. Why are these civilians still there after months? Because they were waiting for the Russian forces, but the Ukrainian forces are forcing them to leave. They're pretty much telling them, no, you can't make your own decision to be rescued by these Russian forces. They are the enemy. We hate them. You have to leave. I'm pretty sure they would actually be willing to hurt these civilians, right? Before actually letting them surrender to the Russian forces. So it says Ukrainian forces were helping civilians flee the battle-scarred eastern city of Bakhmut on Sunday as Russian forces gained a stronghold in suburbs around the city that has been the focus of intense battles for weeks. The Washington-based think tank Institute for the Study of War, or as I like to call them, the Propaganda Institute for the Study of War, in its latest assessment said Russian forces appear to have secured a sufficient positional advantage in Bakhmut to conduct a turning movement to force Ukrainian troops to abandon prepared defense positions. In other words, the Russians are winning. Looks like the Ukrainian forces are going to have to pull out. Now, these guys are hilarious. They like to use all these, complex terminologies and words to sort of confuse the reader and make it seem like, Russia isn't doing that good and like Ukraine is actually winning and, that Ukraine is actually going to, push back. But every time they make a prediction, it turns out the opposite. And every time Russia gains a victory, they continue on with all this ridiculous assessments that they have. But anyways, let's keep on reading here. It says, the Russians have not forced the Ukrainian military to withdraw, but may not need to, the assessment says. The Russian mercenary team Wagner Group has committed its most advanced and prepared elements to assault operations in the area. And Ukraine authorities are not sure the city is worth the cost of defense, the Institute said. So remember, guys, initially they were accusing the Wagner Group of sending criminals to fight, but since these criminals are now about to conquer the most fortified city of the Ukrainian forces, apparently now these are elite units. Wow, that is some good RP there. PR there, right? Public relations management there. Ukrainian forces are far more likely to withdraw than to become encircled. Oh, wow. So the Institute for the Study of War is saying, the Ukrainians are so smart now that rather than risk an encirclement, they're going to strategically withdraw. No, they absolutely got destroyed. And in order to save whatever units are left here, they're pretty much, they have to leave. They have to leave or die. Ukraine's cabinet minister approved the state anti-corruption program, providing systemic steps aimed at providing Ukrainians more government transparency. Okay, so that's just talking about the corruption there. Again, it's getting into some propaganda stating that Russia is running out of ammunition, which is absolutely nonsensical, guys. This is much like the rumors that last year that stated that Vladimir Putin had cancer and that he was close to dying. As a matter of fact, it turned out that President Biden just had some cancerous skin cancer removed from his chest in a recent operation. You barely saw that covered on the Western media, of course. Again, this is all propaganda, guys. But yeah, just a short report there, guys. This is being reported here by other mainstream news media sources, but I wanted to take a quick look at this article. But yeah, guys, Ukrainian forces are now starting to withdraw here. They have blown up bridges. They are forcing these citizens waiting to be rescued by the Russians to leave now. These citizens don't want to live under Ukrainian rule. They want to be under the rule of the Russian government, and these Ukrainian forces are not allowing them. They're actually burning their homes, and I'm sure they're aiming their guns at them, forcing them to leave. So pretty terrible what is going on there. But yeah, you can see here, guys, you don't have to be an expert to see that it's over here in Bakhmut. And as Zelensky stated there, this would be a major turning point in the war, and he was absolutely right about that. Anyways, remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I'll have more updates tomorrow, God willing. Have yourselves a nice Sunday, and God bless.